I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just stood at the edge of that porch light and watched my granddaughter scrub a stranger's kitchen floor in her own grandmother's house, on her hands and knees, while her husband stepped over her like she was furniture. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 68 years old, and what I did over the next 9 days is something my whole family is still talking about. Before I go any further, let me say this plain. If you believe family is supposed to lift each other up, not grind each other into the ground, hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm fixing to tell you will make your blood boil before it makes your heart soar. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight, brother, sister? I want to know who's riding with me on this one. To most folks in Rock Hill, South Carolina, I'm just Walter, the man who used to drive forklifts down at the old textile warehouse before it shut down in '04. I wear the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation. I drive a 2009 Silverado with 210,000 miles on it. My neighbors think I scrape by on a union pension and a little Social Security. They have no idea. They don't know that back in 1989, when nobody would lend a black man from the Mill Village a dime, I started buying up condemned row houses for nothing and fixing them myself with these 2 hands. They don't know that those row houses became apartment complexes, and those apartment complexes became a property management company, and that company now owns commercial real estate across 4 states. They don't know I sit on the board of 2 black-owned credit unions, or that 3 months ago I closed on the sale of a shopping plaza in Charlotte for a number with 8 zeros in it. I built all of it in the shadows on purpose, because I wanted to know before I died who in my family loved me, and who was just waiting on the will. My wife Odessa and I have been married 43 years. She is the reason I am anything at all. When the bank turned me down 9 times, she pawned her mother's wedding ring for the 10th try. She raised our daughter, Renee, while I worked nights, and she never once asked me for anything I couldn't afford to give her twice over. Odessa had a stroke 18 months ago. A mild one, the doctors said, but it left her right hand weak and her speech a little slow when she got tired. She needed help. Real help. Patient help. When our daughter Renee married Marcus Doyle, a smooth-talking man who climbed his way up to regional VP at an insurance firm, Odessa and I did what we thought any parents would do. We bought them a 6-bedroom house in a gated community outside Fort Mill through a blind trust, so Marcus's name never had to touch the deed paperwork. That's just how I structure things. Always have. We paid for the renovations. I made a few calls and got Marcus in front of the right people for that promotion he's so proud of, though he believes to this day he earned it on merit alone. All we asked in return was a room in that big house when we visited, and that they look after Odessa while I handled business. I had a logistics deal closing in Atlanta that needed 3 weeks of my full attention. 3 weeks. That's all the rope I gave them, and that's all the rope they needed to hang my wife with. It was a Thursday evening in March when I cut my trip short and drove back early. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see Odessa's face light up when I walked through that door 2 weeks before she expected me. I pulled into that gated neighborhood a little past 7, and I could see the house from 3 driveways down lit up, cars lining the circular drive, a string quartet's worth of noise spilling out into the evening air. Renee hadn't mentioned a party. My stomach knotted up the way it does right before a deal goes sideways, and in 68 years I have learned never to ignore that feeling. I parked on the street and walked up, my old duffel bag over my shoulder, rain starting to mist down soft and cold. I must have looked like a man who'd wandered off from a bus stop, in my work boots and flannel, walking toward a house with a fountain out front. I came around the side path toward the kitchen entrance, the one Odessa always used because the front door sticks, and that's when I saw her through the lit window. My Odessa, on her knees, on the tile. A bucket of gray water beside her and a scrub brush in her weak right hand, the one that still doesn't close all the way since the stroke. She was wearing a stained apron over her church clothes, her good blue dress, the one I bought her for our anniversary, and her hair, which she always kept pressed and neat, was matted to her forehead with sweat. She was scrubbing at a wine stain on the floor, slow, struggling, her bad hand barely gripping the brush, while behind her, not 3 feet away, stood a caterer's cart loaded with trays of food for 40 people. I froze at that window like a man looking at his own coffin. The kitchen door swung open. Marcus walked in, tuxedo jacket open, a glass of bourbon sweating in his hand. He looked down at Odessa and didn't break stride. "You missed a spot," he said, and laughed a short, ugly bark of a laugh over his shoulder to someone I couldn't see. I swear, Renee's grandmother's people used to do this exact same work for real money. Guess it's in the blood. Odessa flinched like she'd been struck. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, and my chest split open right down the middle, because I heard the word, "sir," coming out of the mouth of a woman who built a family out of nothing alongside me, who never called any man sir in her life, except in church. "I'll have it clean, directly. Sir, 43 years of marriage, and she was calling our son-in-law sir." Marcus set his glass down on the counter, hard enough that bourbon sloshed over the rim, and crouched down to her level, talking slow, the way you'd talk to a dog that wasn't learning fast enough. "Mrs. Briggs," he said, "I have the Hendersons in my dining room right now. The Hendersons. Mr. Henderson is going to make me a senior VP by Christmas, if tonight goes right. So when I tell you something needs cleaning, I need it clean, not eventually clean. Now clean. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes, sir, I understand." I had heard enough. I stepped through that kitchen door, rain dripping off the brim of my cap, and I said, "She's not your maid, Marcus. She's your wife's mother." He spun around so fast he nearly knocked his own drink off the counter. For a second, just a second, something flickered in his face. Not shame. Calculation. Then it smoothed back over into that salesman's grin he wears, like a second skin. "Walter," he said, "didn't expect you for another 2 weeks." He didn't even glance at Odessa, who was still on her knees, shaking now, looking at me like she couldn't quite believe I was real. "Clearly," I said. "Look, it's not what it looks like. Renee's mother offered to help out tonight. She likes to feel useful. She's on the floor in her church dress with a bucket of dirty water, Marcus. Don't insult me by finishing that sentence." That's when Renee came around the corner, wine glass in hand, hair done up for the party, and saw me standing there, my daughter, 29 years old, raised better than this. Her face went the color of old paper. "Daddy," she said, when did you... Why is your mother scrubbing your floor, Renee?" She looked at Marcus. She looked at me. She looked at her mother on the ground. And then, God help me, she said, "Daddy, it's just one night. We have important people here." Mama said she didn't mind. I reached down and helped Odessa to her feet. Her bad hand trembled in mine. "She doesn't mind because you've made her afraid to mind," I said quietly. "How long has this been happening?" Nobody answered me. The silence answered for them. "Get her things," I said to no one in particular. "We're leaving." Marcus stepped in front of the doorway, blocking it, that grin gone now, something colder underneath it. "Walter, come on now. You know how this works. We give you and Odessa a roof, a real nice one, and in exchange, when we need a hand around here, we ask for one. That's just how families operate. You think you're the only one who ever worked for what you've got? I built this career with my own 2 hands. This house," I said slowly, "isn't yours. Same way that promotion you're so proud of isn't entirely yours either. You'd be surprised what's not yours, Marcus." He laughed in my face. "Old man, you drove a forklift for a living. Don't lecture me about ownership." He looked past me at the dining room, where I could hear voices, glasses, laughter, the Hendersons, waiting. "Take your wife to the guest room and let her rest. We'll talk in the morning, when you've calmed down and remembered who pays the bills around here." I took my hand and very gently moved him out of the doorway, the way you'd move a coat rack. I didn't say another word to him that night. I walked Odessa out to my truck through the rain, helped her into the passenger seat, and watched my hands shake on the steering wheel for a full minute before I could turn the key. "Walter," she whispered, once we were on the highway, her voice thin and tired, in a way that scared me more than anything that night. I didn't want to be a burden. Renee asked me to help, and I didn't want to cause trouble for her marriage. "You are not a burden," I said, my voice cracking on the word. "You hear me, Des? Not now. Not ever. Not while I'm breathing." I drove us straight to the Hilton downtown, the nicest one in the city, and got us the top floor. The staff knew me. I own a piece of that hotel through one of my holding companies, something Marcus never bothered to find out, because he never once asked a single real question about who I was. He just decided he already knew. I ran Odessa a hot bath and helped her undress, and that's when I saw the bruises, yellow-green ones on her upper arms, the shape of fingers. A welt on her hip, she said, came from catching herself on a doorframe, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine when she said it. She'd lost weight. Her wedding ring spun loose on her finger now. I sat in the dark of that hotel room after she fell asleep, and I called the one number I knew would pick up at midnight. "Walter," said Pearl Henley, "my attorney for 26 years, the sharpest woman in 3 counties and the only person besides Odessa who knows the full shape of what I own. What's wrong?" "Pearl, I need you to find out everything. Bank records, the trust, all of it. And I need a doctor I can trust. Tonight, if possible, for Odessa. There's bruising." There was a pause on the line. "Walter, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying my daughter let her husband work my wife like hired help, and I want to know how deep this goes before I decide what to do about it." "Give me till morning," Pearl said. "I'll have something." The next morning, Dr. Femi Adeyemi, an old friend from the credit union board and a physician at the regional medical center, met us at a private entrance. He examined Odessa for 2 hours. When he finally pulled me into the hallway, his face had the look of a man who'd seen something he wished he hadn't. "Walter, she's malnourished. Not starving, but underfed, like someone's been controlling her portions. Her blood pressure medication levels are off, way under therapeutic dose. Either she's not been given her full prescription, or somebody's been cutting her pills." Cutting her pills? Why would anybody? Because an under-medicated stroke patient gets confused easier, Walter. Fatigued easier, compliant easier. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm saying it's consistent with what I'm looking at, and I want a full panel before either of us jumps to conclusions. He paused. "The bruising is consistent with being gripped, repeatedly, hard, probably to move her or position her against her will. I have to ask you directly, has anyone struck your wife?" I felt the floor tilt under me. "Document everything," I said. "Photos, the works. And Femi, I need this kept quiet for now. Not buried. Quiet. There's a difference." "I understand the difference," he said. That afternoon, Pearl called with the financial picture, and it was worse than I'd let myself imagine. 5 years back, I'd set up a modest trust for Renee and Marcus' house maintenance, taxes, a comfortable stipend, and a separate emergency medical account specifically for Odessa's care, since her health had always been more fragile than mine. $85,000 sat in that medical account. Pearl found a withdrawal 3 months prior. $60,000, signature on file, Odessa Briggs. "Walter, your wife didn't sign this. Look at the pressure on the loops. It's a tracing job, and not a good one." "Where did it go?" "A boat dealership in Charleston. 38-footer. The rest went to a country club initiation fee and 4 custom suits from a tailor on Park Avenue." I sat with that for a long moment, the rage building slow and cold in my chest, like ice forming on a pond. "He stole my wife's medical money to buy a boat," I said. "There's more," Pearl said. "I pulled the deed records on the house, like you asked." "Walter, that house is in the trust. Marcus and Renee have a lifetime occupancy agreement, contingent on good standing, same as you structure all your properties. But 2 months ago, somebody filed a quitclaim deed transferring title from the trust directly to Marcus, personally, notarized. Forged notary stamp, forged signature yours, this time, not Odessa's. He used that fake deed for something. He used it as collateral. He took out a home equity loan against a house he does not legally own. $400,000, Walter, from a private lender that charges interest rates that should be illegal. Where'd the money go? Half of it covered gambling debts at a casino on the coast. The other half is sitting in a startup he invested in some app that supposedly helps insurance agents close deals faster. I had my analyst look into it. "It's vapor, Walter. There's no product. It's either a scam or he's the one being scammed, and either way, that money is gone." I closed my eyes. "He's drowning," I said, "and he's been using my wife as a flotation device." "That's about the size of it," Pearl said. What do you want to do? I want to know everything about him by Sunday, I said. Every debt, every lie. I want to own the paper on every dollar that man owes, the same way I do business with anybody who's ever crossed me. And Pearl find out who runs that insurance firm he works for, the actual parent company. Dig past the regional branding. Pearl went quiet for a second. You already suspect something. I made an investment 8 months ago in a holding company called Carolina Crown Capital. I never bothered to ask what it held under the surface. Find out for me. She called back 2 hours later, and I could hear it in her voice before she even said the words. Walter. Carolina Crown owns 60% of Palmetto Premier Insurance Group. That's Marcus's company. You're not just his father-in-law. You're the silent majority owner of the firm that signs his paycheck. I started laughing, low and humorless, the kind of laugh that scares people who've never heard it from me. Well, Pearl, I said, I suppose it's time I had a real conversation with my granddaughter's husband about job performance. I let 3 days pass without answering a single call. I turned my phone off entirely and sat with Odessa, feeding her good food, getting her real doses of her medication, watching the fog that I hadn't even realized had settled over her start. Slowly, to lift. Renee called 11 times. Marcus called 4, his voicemails, sliding from annoyed to threatening, accusing me of kidnapping, my own wife, threatening to cut off her health insurance, which he didn't even know I'd already replaced with a private policy from one of my own companies. By the 4th day, his tone had shifted entirely. The last voicemail he left was almost gleeful. Walter, look, I get it. You're upset. But let's be adults. Renee and I talked, and honestly, we think it's best if you two find your own place going forward. We changed the access code at the gate. No hard feelings, but a man my age needs his space to build his legacy. You understand. He believed he'd won. He believed 2 old people with a beat-up truck had slunk off somewhere to lick their wounds and disappear quietly into a retirement home, embarrassed and broke. He had absolutely no idea that the deal closing that very week, the one making him senior VP by Christmas, was a deal that required my signature to finalize, because I sat on the board that approved it. On Saturday, Marcus and Renee were hosting his promotion celebration. The Hendersons would be there, the whole regional leadership team. I had Pearl confirm it through a contact, and I had 4 days to turn an old forklift driver and his sick wife into something Marcus Doyle had never once imagined we could be. I called in a favor from a stylist who dressed me for board meetings I never told my family I attended. Odessa picked a deep emerald gown, structured, with sleeves long enough to cover the fading bruises, because she said, and I'll never forget this, I don't want them looking at what he did to me. I want them looking at what he's about to lose. I bought her a strand of pearls that had been my mother's, reset in white gold, because Odessa never did care for diamonds, said they were cold. I had my beard trimmed for the first time in 3 years. I put on a suit that cost more than the truck I still drive every single day. I called Marcus's actual boss, not the regional director he kissed up to, but Eugene Castellan, the CEO of Palmetto Premier itself, a man I'd shaken hands with twice at board functions, where I never once mentioned my family connection. Eugene, I said. Walter Briggs, I understand you'll be at a celebration Saturday night for one of your rising stars. Walter, yes, of course, wait. You know Marcus Doyle? Intimately, I said. I'm his father-in-law. I'd like to attend, if that's all right with you. And Eugene, bring whatever paperwork your legal team has on hand regarding employee conduct and financial disclosure requirements. I think you'll want it. There was a long pause. Walter, is everything all right? No, I said, but it's about to be. Saturday evening, I hired 4 off-duty officers I knew personally through the credit union's community outreach program. Asked them to stand quietly near the gate, not for show, just so nobody got the bright idea to put their hands on an old man or his wife. I rented a black Bentley, the kind of car that turns heads even in a neighborhood full of money, and we rode up that circular driveway as the party noise spilled out into the evening. Marcus was on the front steps glad-handing his bosses when our car pulled up. I watched his face cycle through confusion, then recognition, then something close to terror, as the driver opened the door, and I stepped out in a $10,000 suit, followed by Odessa in emerald silk and her pearls, looking like the queen she's always been to me. Walter, he said. What? Whose car is that? Hello, Marcus, I said. I believe we have some business to discuss. I walked past him into that house, my house, legally, though he never bothered to check straight into the great room where 40 of his colleagues stood with champagne flutes in hand. Renee saw her mother first, and the glass nearly slipped out of her fingers. The room went quiet the way a room does when something's wrong, but nobody can name it yet. Eugene, I said, finding the CEO's eyes across the room. Thank you for coming. Eugene Castellan crossed the room, hand extended, and shook mine with the kind of respect that made every single person watching recalculate everything they thought they knew. Walter, good to see you. I have to admit, I'm a little lost. You won't be in a minute, I said. I turned to face the room, and to face Marcus, who stood frozen by the staircase, like a man watching the ground open beneath his own feet. 3 months ago, this man stole $60,000 from a medical account meant to care for my wife by forging her signature. He's been under-medicating her, controlling her food, and using her, a woman who survived a stroke, as unpaid household labor in front of his own party guests. He forged my signature on a deed to take out a fraudulent loan against a house he does not own, to cover gambling debts and a worthless startup investment. That's insane, Marcus said, but his voice had gone thin and high, all the oil drained out of it. Renee, tell them this is insane. Renee said nothing. She stood there, mascara already starting to streak, looking back and forth between her husband and her parents, like a woman watching 2 trains about to collide and realizing she was standing on the tracks. Eugene? I continued. I'd also like to mention, for the record, that Carolina Crown Capital holds a controlling 60% stake in Palmetto Premier. I am the managing partner of Carolina Crown. The silence that followed was the kind you could have poured concrete into. You're his, Eugene started. His father-in-law, his landlord, and as of this moment, his employer, I said. And I'd like to discuss his employment status with you tonight, if you're amenable. Eugene didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone, made a single call, and within minutes, a termination letter drafted on the spot by his general counsel over the phone was read aloud to the room. Effective immediately, for cause, citing financial misconduct discovered during the course of this evening, with a formal investigation to follow regarding any company resources used to cover personal gambling losses. You can't do this, Marcus said, grabbing at the banister to keep himself upright. Walter, please, we're family. You called my wife Sir's help 2 nights ago while she scrubbed your floor on her bad hand, I said. Family doesn't do that to family. Pearl stepped forward then, briefcase in hand, and laid out, calm as Sunday morning, the eviction notice the house belonging to the trust, the occupancy agreement void due to the documented financial fraud and elder mistreatment, effective that very night. Then came the part I'd saved, the part I'd been waiting 4 days to deliver. I nodded to Pearl, and she connected a laptop to the television in the great room and the security footage from the kitchen camera I'd had quietly installed years ago for Odessa's safety, never imagining I'd need it for this played for the whole room. Odessa on her knees, Marcus's foot nudging her shoulder, the word sir passing her lips on a loop nobody in that room could unhear. A woman near the bar covered her mouth with her hand. Eugene's jaw was set like stone. Marcus tried to lunge for the laptop, and one of the off-duty officers near the door simply stepped between him and the screen, and that was the end of that. Renee finally broke, sinking onto the bottom stair, sobbing into her hands. Daddy, I didn't know what to do, he said. If I didn't help keep the peace, he'd... You watched your mother call him Sir, Renee, I said, and my voice did not rise, did not shake. You watched her on the floor in her church dress. You had a phone in your hand the whole time. You could have called me. You chose silence instead, because silence was comfortable, and your mother's dignity was not your priority. That is a choice, and choices have consequences, even the quiet ones. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. I don't know, baby, I said, and for the first time that night my voice broke a little, because underneath all that righteous anger she is still my daughter, still the girl I taught to ride a bicycle in a church parking lot. But it can't be here. Not tonight. The blue lights came up the driveway 20 minutes later, not for the eviction, but for the forged deed and the forged signature on a withdrawal slip. both federal matters once they crossed state lines through a bank, which Pearl had already confirmed they had. Marcus didn't run. He just sat down hard on the bottom step, the same step my daughter was crying on, and put his face in his hands and didn't say another word as two officers walked him out past the catering table still loaded with food nobody had touched. We sold that house within 2 weeks. I didn't want to walk through it again, didn't want one stick of furniture that had watched what happened in that kitchen. Odessa and I bought a smaller place instead, 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, 20 minutes outside the city. Close enough to her sister and her church friends, far enough that nobody we didn't choose to let in could find their way to our door uninvited. These days I wake up early, same as always, and I sit on that porch and watch the sun come up over the pines while Odessa hums in the kitchen behind me. Her good hand and her bad hand both steady now on the coffee pot, no fear left in either of them. Her medication is right, her meals are right, her color has come back into her cheeks. She laughs easy these days, loud, the way she used to before any of this started. We don't talk about Marcus much. Last I heard from Pearl, he took a plea on the wire fraud to avoid a harder sentence on the elder financial abuse charge, and he's looking at 6 years upstate. No boat, no startup, no senior anything waiting on the other side of it. Renee writes letters sometimes. I read every one. I haven't answered yet. Her mother says I will, when I'm ready, and I believe her, because Odessa has always known me better than I know myself. There's a difference between cutting someone off forever and just making them sit for a good long while in the consequences they built with their own 2 hands. I am still deciding which one this is. What I learned, sitting in that rain outside my own granddaughter's house, watching my wife on her knees, is this. A man in a flannel shirt driving a 12-year-old truck is not always a poor man. Sometimes he's just a man who learned, the hard way, decades ago, that the people who love you for your wallet will show you exactly who they are the moment they think nobody's watching. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you raised is let them learn that lesson too, even if it breaks your heart clean in half to watch it happen. My name is Walter Briggs. I drove a forklift for 22 years. I am worth more money than my own family ever bothered to ask about. And I am the man who taught his daughter that love without respect is just a transaction wearing a family photo. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. If you believe Odessa got the justice she deserved, hit that like button and subscribe for more. And tell me, family, would you have given Renee a second chance? Or did she earn every bit of that silence? I'll see you in the next story. Respect isn't something you put on for guests and take off when family's watching from the kitchen floor. It's the same in front of strangers as it is behind closed doors, or it isn't real at all. Sometimes the people who love us loudest stay quiet too long. And sometimes the ones we underestimate are the ones holding us up the whole time. Honor the people who showed up for you. Loud or quiet, they're the ones worth keeping close. Shin Lui, Ko Trin Trendu AI Sang Tao, Vahu Ko Nyam Mang Lai Zachi Zai Tri Cho Quy Vi. Đồng thời, gửi gắm một bài học sống tích cực và nhân văn.